Today, we meet two St. Louis photographers and share their work. Join us next on City Corner. I'm Steve Potter, and welcome to City Corner. Today we're going to meet two St. Louis photographers and share their work and the stories behind their work. Coming up a little later, we'll meet Jerry Tovo, who's done an interesting exhibition on homeless veterans. But first, welcome to City Corner, Richard Sprengler. Hi, Richard. How are you?
I am fine.
I should say welcome back, right?
It's been several times, but I'm always glad to come back.
We were laughing earlier. Did you say, I've been doing this show going on 21 years. It was almost that long ago. I think you were on the first time, right?
About that time I was on, yeah.
Okay, so we're old friends. Listen, your new work has been so interesting because we've been Facebook friends for a while, so I would see work just when I'd be going through Facebook, your Urban Decay series. And for the last 5 or 6 months, I thought, I'm going to do a show about that someday. So Urban Decay, could you kind of set that up for us?
How the whole project started is I studied photography at Southern Illinois, Carbondale, and while there I took an architectural photography class, and I started photographing St. Louis, and that was 42 years ago. When you do a lot of projects, you'll come to a point where you either have to stop because you're not doing anything new, or and that was happening to me. And I thought, what can I do differently? I needed to switch gears. So I thought, I've been glamorizing the architecture of St. Louis, and that's not the whole picture of what's going on in this city. So I thought it would be really good to show the other side, and that was the Urban Decay.
Right, so instead of a shiny picture of the arch and the old Capitol building, it might be the backside of a warehouse in an alley. I just made that up, but that's sort of it.
Yeah, one of the photographs we'll see is a burned out warehouse, and through the window you can see the arch in the background.
Well, why don't we just jump into it and take a look at one of your images first. This is Urban Decay, and you can tell us what we're looking at.
This is the Lakley Power Building in Lakley's Landing. It's right next to that huge power building. This has been abandoned for at least 50 years. And for the last 30 years, I've been driving by that building thinking, gosh, I sure would like to get in there. I would peek through the windows at times, and it was all boarded up. Several weeks ago, I drove by, and there were holes in the plywood where people had gotten in. So I looked around, and nobody was there, so I snuck in for a couple hours.
Let's go to the next one.
This is the Lakley Power Station building also. And it's interesting, graffiti artists will use these old buildings as canvases for their art. And a lot of it is really, really good. Some of it is just pure vandalism, but the best of it is an art form.
Right. You know, I think of that when I see them on exterior buildings sometimes. I think you shouldn't be doing something on someone else's property, but at the same time, I think, wow, they did a good job.
Right.
Does that make any sense? How do you decide what makes a good photograph, particularly in your Urban Decay series? Not just any rundown building is going to work. Is it just something you know instinctively when you see it?
I think the bottom line is it has to be a photograph that captivates you as a viewer, where you look at it and you want to keep looking at it because there's so much information in it. The photographs that aren't very successful, people will look at it and 2 seconds later they'll go on.
Right.
But if the viewer stops and goes, oh, that's interesting, then I think I've captured something.
Let's look at a couple more.
Okay. This is a building in North St. Louis that's been abandoned for many, many years. And I would like to read something. I've just read a book, a very important book called The Heartbreak of America. And he describes what's going on economically that causes this to happen to cities. Poor homeowners are losing homes on which they can't afford to pay the property taxes. As of this writing, the city's Land Reutilization Authority holds over 12,000 properties in the city, the vast majority of them on the city's north side, and the vast majority of them is seized by the city in lieu of unpaid taxes. While many of the properties are undoubtedly abandoned for reasons other than their owner's ability to pay their real estate taxes, it is nevertheless profoundly ironic, malignantly ironic, the poor black homeowners lose their houses over unpaid real estate taxes in a city where much of the commercial property held by wealthy firms is completely tax exempt. And the irony deepens. The city itself is too broke to keep the property it has seized up to code, its own code, and so thousands of parcels of property sit boarded up, deteriorating, and abandoned while a large number of unhoused people sleep on the streets.
Interesting. And of course, there's a big effort going on currently about taking down abandoned properties, and as we speak, right?
Right. Something should be done.
But I'm glad you're getting these images before it happens.
Yeah.
Let's look at a couple more Richard Sprengler's images of urban decay.
This is the power plant at the National City Stockyards. It is no longer there. It was torn down because of the building of the new bridge came through that area. But in the early 1900s, this was one of the largest stockyards in the country, and it used so much electricity that they had their own power company. And this is a large steam turbine engine that would create electricity for the stockyards.
Let's go to the next one.
This is also the power station for the National City Stockyards. It's a huge I-beam that collapsed. You could see how it came down the wall in the distance. And up in the very top left corner, you can see the I-beam that's still holding up the concrete ceiling.
Let's look at another one.
This is the rooftop of the power building. It had two huge smokestacks, over 200 feet tall. They were the tallest structures in East St. Louis at the time.
Do you have a website people can go to?
I do. It's richardsprengler.com. And to see this work, it is under the heading of Classic St. Louis. And under Classic St. Louis, it's called Urban Decay.
Have you had an official show, Urban Decay exhibition at any location yet?
Not yet, but that's next. I would like to publish a book. So an exhibition and a book, I hope, is in the future.
Oh, a book seems like a natural. How many images do you think you have?
Right now, I've got about 50.
Oh, that's all, really? I thought you were going to say like
Well,
500.
there's more than that, but these are the really good ones that are on the website. I have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
Let's look at some more urban decay.
This is a warehouse that was abandoned and then collapsed and then burned on Choteau's Landing, which is the warehouse district south of the Arch. This was influenced by a great photograph I saw years ago of Washington, D.C. that showed the Capitol building and the monuments in the distance, and in the foreground it was the D.C. ghetto where the abandoned field had children playing in the foreground, but you could see the Capitol building in the distance. And I've tried to use that same theme in a lot of my photographs. You can see the arch in the distance here.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like that.
So there's a double type, there's two images here. This is the same thing. This is the Stan Musial Bridge in the distance, and this is the freight depot on Lakley's Landing that has been abandoned for many, many years.
Let's look at one more before my next question.
This is the old Van Deventer overpass. It was finally torn down about 15 years ago and the new overpass put up. But
Was that over like Highway 40 or 44?
it was south of 40. It went over railroad tracks, I know that.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. But I think all photographers gravitate towards this subject matter. It's just something about it is intriguing.
Something about that one I really like. I know you've done some workshops and things in the past. Do you have anything going on now?
Yes, I conduct workshops for the International Photography Hall of Fame, architectural workshops. I just did one on the Fox Theater where the students could go to the Fox Theater for 2 hours. The next one coming up is at the College Church in Grand Center, and then I have one coming up at the main library in downtown St. Louis.
And do you have to be a professional photographer to go to those things?
No, it's open to everybody.
Yeah. What kind of people come?
Just a wide variety. Wealthy people, people that aren't wealthy, men, women, students, older people.
Okay, everybody.
Everybody, yeah.
Let's look at a few more of your urban decay images.
This one is called the David P. Wall Pavilion in North St. Louis. And I Googled this building to try to find out its history, and there's absolutely nothing on the internet about it. So I just have to guess as to what happened to it. It may have suffered the same fate as Pruitt-Igoe. Pruitt-Igoe failed because the buildings weren't maintained by the city. The federal government built Pruitt-Igoe under the agreement that St. Louis would maintain the buildings, and they spent the money doing something else. So everything just decayed and it fell apart.
I don't have any photographs of Pruitt-Igoe, but I have visual images of it.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Let's look at your next image here.
This is another warehouse south of the Arch, Shoto's Landing.
I have to ask you, because a lot of them remind me of this one. It looks like you're inside a building about to fall down.
I am.
Are you ever concerned about your safety?
I am. I'm very careful at what I do. When I go in, I look at the space and particularly the floor. And if there's an unsafe floor, I'm always testing it.
And you always have to have permission to go in, right? I mean,
There's an old photography saying called "It is better to ask forgiveness than permission."
wait a minute, let me think about that.
If you ask permission, 95% of the time they say no. So for 42 years, I've just been going in these spaces and photographing, and I'm respectful. I've been approached by owners sometimes, and I tell them what I'm doing, and if you're nice to people, it'll be okay.
I think we have time maybe to see two more.
Okay.
Let's do that.
This is another building. This is north of Lakley's Landing. It's a burned-out warehouse. Graffiti artists are using it for their canvas, and things are being dumped in these areas by people. It becomes a huge landfill. Mm-hmm. And the homeless people go through all these landfills, and they pull things out that they can use. I photographed a homeless person who had 2 couches in his shelter.
Wow.
Yeah. So just everything is thrown in these places. It's really a shame.
Let's go to the next one.
This one isn't. That's the same thing where I've got a near foreground and then in the distance,
I like that.
The arch. This is an abandoned homeless shelter, and it's leaning up against the Eads Bridge, believe it or not. And so here's homeless people on the waterfront of St. Louis, only 150 feet from the national park.
Well, Richard, again, to wrap things up, how can people find these? And gee, are people able to purchase any of your work or what?
Yes, I have a website, richardsprangler.com, and it is hooked up to PayPal where they can purchase online at my website.
Very good. There it is, the information people can go to. I really have loved seeing your Urban Decay series on Facebook, and I think it would make a great book. So
Thank you very
I want
much.
you to share that. Hey, this program is about photographers, and we're going to meet Jerry Tovo next. He's done an interesting project on homeless veterans. And I don't know, does every photographer in St. Louis know one another? I would think it's a small little world.
It is a small world. I do know Jerry. We've taken photography classes together at Merrimack Community College, and I've known him for about 15 years.
All right, I'm going to introduce him to our audience next. Richard Sprangler, thank you so much, and I really enjoy your work. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And we'll have more work from a local St. Louis photographer next on City Corner.
The Missouri Botanical Garden is loved by green thumbs and non-gardening types alike because you can play. You can relax. And there's always something new to experience, no matter the time of day or the season. And learn about conservation and one-of-a-kind plants. So come and experience St. Louis.
Operation Wonder Park is a go!
There's nothing more powerful than imagination. But don't just imagine. Use STEM to change the world.
Who's with me?
It's gonna hurt tomorrow.
If she can STEM, so can you. Find out more at She Can STEM.
I'm Steve Potter, and welcome back to City Corner. We continue our show today, and we meet another St. Louis photographer, Jerry Tovo. Welcome back to you as well. I don't know how long it's been.
Well, it's good to see you, Steve. It's been 8 years, I remember.
Has it really?
Yeah.
Wow. You know, we were just talking to Richard Sprengler, and he'd been here like 19 years ago or something like that.
Yeah.
I asked him about knowing you, and so do all you guys know one another?
Well, pretty much, yeah. But, you know, like I told you earlier, we didn't actually go out and have beers together lately, but then, yeah, especially when we were in the younger commercial business, we pretty much all knew each other.
Right, because you both were commercial photographers at
Yes.
one time
Yes.
in your career, like
Yeah.
taking pictures for what,
Yeah.
supermarkets and real
Well,
estate?
I did a lot of stuff for the brewery and, you know, brochure work, a lot of fashion kind of work.
Well, you have an exhibition coming up at the International Photography Hall of Fame, and that's going to run from March the 30th through June the 11th. Tell me about this whole project that has to do with homeless veterans.
Well, it started back, I developed a little reputation for shooting black and white images, and towards the end of that, just before the start of the homeless thing, the stuff became really gritty, and so it showed everybody's faces, their lives on their faces. Mm-hmm. And I started hearing about, you know, the amount of homeless people on the street, and became fairly a news piece at that time. And I thought, well, this is an interesting opportunity because my specialty is what those people are. So I thought maybe I can do a project here to raise the awareness of homeless veterans, and we just launched into it without a lot of consideration for what's going to take to do that.
Well, why don't we just jump right in and take a look at one of your images and identify this person as much as you care to.
Okay. That's Barbara. She's from Indianapolis. She's a sweet lady. She'd been in the military for a long time, and even her husband was in the military. But she had some downtime, and she ended up in a shelter in Indianapolis. And when I asked her, how did she get here to this date, she just started crying, like very apologetic. I'm sorry I'm crying. I said, oh, don't, please, this is exactly what I need to see. So Barbara from Indianapolis, it was good.
So how would you meet people like her and others?
Well, we learned early that we had to coordinate with somebody in the cities before we went. So this was a shelter that took in homeless people, and they weeded out the veterans of it, and they led us to these people.
Because a little backstory, you had this exhibit before at the History Museum, I think, and so you're bringing it back now.
Yes. I cannot thank the History Museum enough. It was a photographer's dream. It was in the Piper Museum there, and we had over 35,000 viewers there.
Wow.
But it was totally sponsored by the History Museum. They funded the artwork and put us in an excellent position.
So now it's coming to Grand Center. That's great. Let's take a look at another one of your images of homeless veterans. Who's this fellow?
That's Clarence. Clarence was in Chicago in I guess you would call it a halfway house of sorts. But you know, these tough guys, you know, they always come in here, rugged street guys, and he started crying a little bit too. You can see the tear in his eye. Nice man. I mean, most of them are nice people. There are a few of them that scared me a little bit, but most of them are nice people. But they're just down. And I have to tell you that a very high percentage of these homeless people are addicts of some sort, drug addicts or alcohol addicts or whatever it is, and they can't. There's not enough support for them to go through the rehab facilities.
Let's look at another.
That's Aaron, and he's from Indianapolis, and this is one of my favorite images. You know, it just rings true with me.
Why?
Well, photographically, it rings true with me. You know, his attire is fairly typical. It was a very hot day, but he's an extremely nice man. He's willing to do whatever needed to be done.
Jerry, I'm just wondering in my own mind, putting myself in your shoes, if I was there meeting these people and hearing their stories, I would think that every once in a while you meet somebody that you almost think you care about. There must be once in a while an emotional thing there.
Oh, absolutely. And in the long term, that wore on me. That really wore on me towards the end of the project, especially after we lost, you know, funding or we couldn't go on.
Because you're hearing their stories and everything.
Oh yeah, and it is a very emotional thing. There are a few of them out of the lot that are kind of cold and actually kind of working the system. But yeah, you hear a lot of the stories. And at one point we were going to write a book, but we just didn't get enough time with everybody to do a book material.
Let's look at a couple more of your images.
That's Elizabeth. She was down in Florida, and it's interesting because
She looks a little more put together than the others.
yeah, these I don't know. There's another one, Ralph, but these people were kind of in that jungle situation. Definitely not urban like most of the people you see in there. This camp was not far from Cape Kennedy, but she had her own little tent and everything like it's by herself. And she had a ferocious dog that looked after her. And I asked her if she wasn't frightened. She said, no, she's not frightened, not at all. But people also said, and I asked her, I said, people say you like it out here. She said, no, I don't like it out here. I like to be somewhere else, but this is the best I can do for now.
Wow. Let's look at the next one.
This is Leroy. He's from down at, well, at the time it was called Hopeville, down the riverfront, not far from Richard was shooting.
In St. Louis?
In St. Louis, yeah. And he was very cooperative for us. He did a lot of things. And he's one of the few people that actually sought me out afterwards looking for a little money to kind of keep him going. I gave everyone my card, and they could call me if they wanted to. I didn't really have money to fund people outside of the project, but
Right.
you know, I found something for him.
Did you ever like want to hear from somebody in particular?
Oh, I hear from him. Yeah, I did hear from him. It's interesting. There was a guy down in Florida. He came out of the Navy, and his family didn't want anything to do with him, so he was out just on the street. He wanted to be a gynecologist and go to school down there. And we gave everybody a token, $20. And he called me about a month later in the middle of the night and says, can you come and take my picture again? I said, well, I'm not close by. He said, well, how long will it take you to get here? But you know, I'm pretty sure his motive was to get another $20. But he's in the collection.
One thing I think it's important to remember, right, that it's really easy to generalize when we're looking at images of these people on hard times, but everybody's story is different.
That's exactly right. You could have taken it out of my book if I wrote the book. Everybody in this thing has a different reason for where they are today. You can't assume, you know, good or bad from them. A lot of people think that homeless people are just ne'er-do-wells, that they, you know, they just really.
Bad things can happen to good people.
It's exactly right. Exactly right.
Let's take a look at a few more of your images, and of course, everybody can see all of these and more at the International Photography Hall of Fame in Grand Center.
Yeah, this might be familiar to people who live out in the Kirkwood area. This is Leov, whose real name is Gary Player, and he was 81 years old at the time. He was a Korean War veteran. He rode everywhere in Kirkwood on a bicycle. I mean, you can see him all the time, day and night. And I probably spent more time with him after the fact than any of the other people. You know, he was a former tennis pro. He's ranked in his age for a chess player.
Well, and what an advanced age. I mean, being on the street would be kind of rough for a young person.
You think so? And I brought that up several times, and he said he had a guru or something like that taught him how to weather the weather, and he could be tolerant of the cold and the heat because he knew how to be that way. But he was an interesting character, and it's a story unto itself. Right. He's a kind of kooky guy. Thought of himself as an intellectual, and probably was, and wrote some poems and stuff for me. But I'm afraid to say I think he's passed away now.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Wow. I guess some of these people disappear and you don't know it because they're not like they're kind of off the map or whatever.
A lot of them disappear, and you know, I like for someone to have tell me if they had passed away. Right. There are many of them. There are many of them. Let's
take a look at a couple more images in the time we have left. Oh, something happened here.
Yeah, this is Bluebeard. He's down in Florida. His real name is Philip Thibodeau, and he was stationed on a Navy ship where he was the first of people to see the wind coming out of Vietnam. So he saw the worst of the worst, and it still haunts him. And as you can see here, if he starts thinking about it much, he'll break down again.
Jerry, you don't have I think you have a temporary studio going on now. Mm-hmm. How does someone get access to your work if they want to see it?
Well, you know, the usual social media stuff. I'm on Instagram and on Facebook. But you know, if somebody really wanted to get in touch with me, they could reach out to the station, and I'm sure you'd steer them my way. That'd be nice. I'd like to hear from some people.
All right, let's take a look at another image. And I should say, if I haven't said it already, In the Faces of Patriotism, the Homeless Veterans Project is the official.
That's the name that we've given it to for the Hall of Fame. Sorry. Originally it was called They May Have Been Heroes. And as we've seen different shows, people have chosen to give it a different title.
Who's this gentleman?
That's Ralph. Ralph was a really interesting guy. He wears a thing, that yellow band that's got the last POW of Afghanistan. And he lives in that same jungle as Elizabeth did. They somehow found an old trailer, like a little tow behind trailer, and they made the best of it as they could. But he ran a MASH unit in Vietnam, and he was very outspoken.
I think you're going to do a lecture on April 2nd. What's that all about?
Well, that's basically what we're doing here. We're going to look at the images and talk about the images, and we'll see what we can do about entertaining people or disillusioning people, whichever one. Yeah.
Let's take a look at another one of your subjects, homeless veterans.
This is Walter. He was he was in Nashville, and I don't know if you can see it here, but he's got little bits of stuff all over him. I thought he would have been sleeping in the hay or something like that, but he'd actually tried to trim his beard, so you see little flakes of his beard on his jacket. But we had a connection in Nashville that was a homeless veteran, and he knew others, and he helped round up some of them, and this is Walter. I like particularly the quality of this image. It's very nice.
Something that looks kind of nice about him, like he's a nice guy.
Oh, most of them are. This is Willie, and Willie's originally from St. Charles. He was in Nashville. He was a mess. I don't know if you can see, he had a gash on his head.
Oh, yeah.
They looked for protected areas to sleep, and he had a little place up under a bridge, and he slipped and he fell and ran down to the edge of the water, and he cracked his head.
Wow.
But he was very cooperative. He was stationed in Guam, and it was interesting because he never told anybody what his mission was there. It was a secret. He said, but I guess it's long enough I can tell you. And apparently they were building underwater, Guam's like a big flat rock, and apparently they were building under the rock shelters and places that they could hide stuff.
Well, Jerry, what do you think people, or what would you like people to go away with after they come and see your work on this particular topic?
I just like to open their eyes. I mean, like you've said, so many people just assume the worst of these homeless people, and they're not the worst. Again, they're not bums. They're in a bad circumstance, and for some reason they ended up there. So cut some slack, understand why they're there.
In the Faces of Patriotism, the Homeless Veterans Project, the International Photography Hall of Fame, March 30th through June 11th. There's all the information. I hope people will go and see it. I find it very moving. Do you have any other projects in your back of your head?
Well, the back of my head's so far away these days. But I just want to thank the hall. And if people want to help, please make a contribution to the hall. They like to keep their doors open, and it's an excellent place.
All right, Jerry Tovo, thank you for sharing your work, and
Okay.
I'd like to see you and Richard come back one of these days with an update.
I hope I'm around to do that.
Okay. Keep taking pictures.
All right, thanks.
I'm Steve Potter. I hope you've enjoyed the program, and join us next time on City Corner. Thanks for watching. Bye.